If you want to create techno synth lines like these, then you've come to the right place. Well, obviously. Because today I will show you the method I used to create them in 3 simple steps. This method is really fun to use, especially once you get to this step. So let's get started. Step 1. Creating the sequence. Today we're going to be using Ableton's Granulator. It's a free Max for Live device, and if you don't use Ableton, you can use any other granular synth. But the Granulator is super powerful for creating unique textured sounds out of simple samples. And speaking of simple samples, let's load this one into the Granulator. It's from a sample pack I've made, which you can download for free in the video description. It has some samples that work really well with Granulator, so definitely check it out. Now we need to come up with a pattern. And since we're making techno, it doesn't need to be anything melodic, though it obviously can. But yeah, we don't need to stick to a specific scale or anything like that. What matters most is that our sequence sounds dope. It's good to keep in mind the principle of question and answer here. So let's get to making the pattern. Maybe like this. Damn. This is hard, isn't it? It's a good thing sequencers exist. In case you don't already know, sequencers are tools for programming MIDI notes into, you guessed it, sequences. And they allow you to randomize completely new ideas at the click of a button. The sequencer I'm using today is called ML185. It's also a free Max for Live device. Definitely check it out too. So now we can start spamming the randomize button until we find something nice. And let me just lower the release time so the notes don't bleed into themselves too much. That's cool, I like that already. We can also change the position of where the sample starts from, or for how long it plays, by this grain size parameter. And let me just raise the tempo a bit. And as for the sequences, I like to make them short, like 8 steps long as opposed to, for example, 16 steps. Because with 8 steps, it's much easier to find something catchy. Repetition is what makes these synths so hypnotizing. Techno is all about creating repetitive patterns. Also, definitely play with making the sequences a little bit shorter or longer than that, so that you create a polymeter. If I make my sequence 5 steps, for example, it's not gonna align with the grid perfectly anymore, and it's gonna interact with the kick and other elements of the track in some very interesting ways. It's optional though, you can try it out, but I often stick with simple 8-step patterns. Nice! Now we have a basic sequence that sounds pretty cool. So now we can get to step 2, which is all about making it sound even cooler. Now, I like to use the randomized sequences as a starting point. Once I find something I like, I usually then adjust it to make it even better. And I can do that by recording the sequence into a MIDI clip. So the sequence is 8 steps, so we're going to choose just the section that loops, and we're gonna move it over here, and now we can turn off the sequencer. Now once I have the sequence in a MIDI clip, I usually then like to experiment with shifting some of the octaves. Maybe transpose this whole thing down. And yeah, maybe I want to delete some notes, maybe I want to add a slight variation to the pattern, you know, stuff like that. But I definitely want to add some swing to the sequence. You can do it by selecting a groove from the groove pool in Ableton, or you can also do that by shifting the notes slightly off grid, like this. And don't skip this step. Adding a bit of groove can make a world of difference for your pattern, seriously. Now let's go back to the Granulator for a second, because there's a couple of settings in here that are pretty fun to play with. You can turn on the FM mode and play with the knobs right here. I don't know much about FM synthesis, but you can hear what it just did. Now it sounds completely different. There's also this spike parameter, which, I don't know, it makes the sound more spiky, I guess, more plucky. I usually turn it up a bit to where it sounds good. And then there's my favorite setting. It's the key slider under the pitch section. And right now it's at 100, which means that all the notes you play are going to be 100% accurate. But boy oh boy do crazy things happen when you turn it down. It creates some microtonal intervals, which can sound really dope if you do it just right. And speaking of intervals, let's try adding the chord device in here. The chord module in Ableton allows you to, you guessed it, create chords. So if you, for example, add the intervals of +3 and +7, your sequence will now only play minor chords. Though, if you want to achieve a more unsettling, dissonant vibe, you dirty little techno freak, I recommend you to use the tritone interval instead. So 6 semitones either up or down. And if that's not enough dissonance for you, you can also try the single semitone interval. Though it's not always a good idea to add the chord device from my experience. Sometimes you might have to experiment with different samples and see what works. And, you know, if you need some samples to get started and inspired, you can download my free sample pack for Granulator. Which, again, the link to it is in the video description. And it's free, goddammit! Cool, now we can get to step 3, which is where we take what we've made and fuck it all up. Here's a couple ideas for you to mix and match. You can go back to your MIDI clip, and if you shift the start marker around, it will change where the pattern starts from. So you can find some really cool, interesting rhythms this way. As for effects, you can add an auto filter in bandpass mode and modulate it with an LFO. See, automatic filter sweeps. They can sound really cool sometimes, especially if you add some delay to them. And speaking of delays, you can also add a grain delay and play with the settings. It's great for experimentation. And once you've done that, you can also record your synth into an audio clip. You can also play with the grain delay while recording. Now you have a very unpredictable sample. And even if the synth you made so far isn't that great, you can try and loop small sections of the audio clip and find something cool. And if that doesn't help, well, you can try booking a one-on-one coaching call with me. I'll try and help you figure it out. The link to the questionnaire to book a call with me is down below in the video description, right under the free samples for Granulator. Wink wink. Make sure to get them as well. So if you followed the steps so far, your Synthlines should be sounding pretty damn good. Though having a good techno synth isn't really enough by itself, is it? You also need a great bass line to carry your track. I just so happen to have made a tutorial on how to create great bass lines. You can watch it right here, and I'll see you there. Cheers.